Hey guys, this is Matthias, and in this video I want to show you my 4 ESF loadouts. And I want to start with what is commonly known as standard. And yeah, by standard we mean standard air-to-air. So now I'll be showing you this from my Vanu point of view, or my Vanu character, but this easily translates into all 3 empires. So yeah, when people talk about standard, they basically mean what you see here. I use the default nose gun, which in this case is the Zeron laser cannon. I have thermal optics, magazine size maxed out, and ammo capacity maxed out. And I never really change around with the upgrades when it comes to the default nose gun. So now I use the fire suppression, I use nanite auto repair, and the hover stability airframe. And rather than having an additional weapon, I use the external afterburner fuel tanks. Now the two deciding factors when it comes to maneuvering and handling of your ESFs is the airframe that you choose and whether or not you fly with the external afterburners or not. What you see right here, I'm using the afterburner in order to give myself some momentum upwards in order to dodge some of the incoming fire here. The tricky thing is, of course, to be able to maintain your aim on your target, knowing whether or not you can put your aim directly on target or if you have to lead. This comes with time experience, and you have to practice quite a lot in order to master this. Now, when it comes to the other two options for airframes, the most common airframe among experienced pilots is the Racer airframe. And the most common techniques used with the Racer airframe is a lot easier to get into in the beginning, since most of the time you will be flying straight towards your enemy and shooting them from close range. At the same time, rushing technique is rather advanced once you get into it and once you understand it, and it is there are only a few pilots in the Planetside 2 community that actually handles it really well. It's most popular among reaver pilots. So the two things that you gain from hover stability is stronger air brakes and stronger vertical thrust. And they are both important when it comes to maneuvering and handling your ESF. The stronger air brakes will allow you to get into hover mode faster. That way you can use the vertical thrust and the afterburners in order to gain momentum in any direction depending on how you angle your ESF. So for the third option when it comes to airframe, you have the dogfighting airframe, which gives you faster or stronger jaw movements, meaning that you can turn left and right faster using the A-D keys if you're playing with the default key bindings. You also get faster roll speed and turning speed, but most pilots get enough speed turning and rolling with the flight sensitivity that you have in game. So the way I see it, there's very little to gain from the dogfighting airframe actually, and of course initially it was designed for players that wanted to focus on air-to-air, but mostly the other two airframes are better for that purpose, considering how the air-to-air gameplay works in Planetside 2. So now going back to the choice of nose gun, the one main reason why somebody would want to replace their default gun with the, well, for the sight, the hailstorm, is because the hailstorm does kill faster and it makes it easier to one-clip your opponent, especially if you get a good surprise attack on them. However, you do one-clip an ESF with the default nose gun of any ESF as well. You just need to maintain your aim on your target for a little bit longer. And there's a lot of unhappiness from a lot of pilots due to the nerf to the dedicated air-to-air nose gun, and it's mostly about the ammo capacity, but other nerfs has been made as well. Now I use a 800 DPI mouse, or that's what it's set to at the moment. I also have the flight sensitivity either at 0.45 or 0.50. And since this is the most important and interesting loadout for most players, I want to show you another minute clip here when I'm using it. After that I'll go through the other three. Now the next loadout I want to show you is another air-to-air loadout. It's the one where I replace the external afterburner with either the air-to-air lock-on missiles or the coyotes. In this case you see the lock-on missiles. I call this my lame air-to-air loadout, and that's because I'm not particularly fond of this loadout. I think it's a little bit too strong for how easy it is to use and some such. And yeah, it's just a matter of opinions. Unfortunately for you guys who are interested in this loadout, I don't have any footage to show at this point. Now my next two loadouts are for air to ground. I'm using the Hornet missiles when I'm trying to go for vehicles, and as I made this video I realized I had quite some certs saved up, and I could actually upgrade them a little bit more. So the reload speed is now maxed out, and I also have the thermal vision for them, and the ammo capacity is also fully upgraded. I rarely, if ever, use any of the rocket pods, the original ones, except for when I'm on any of my Smurfs and I have them from the beginning of creating that character. Now when I use the Hornets, and I'm going for ground targets such as this Sunderer, I'm trying to avoid incoming fire in a similar way that I do when I'm fighting an enemy ESF. However, it's not nearly as effective. It is a lot easier to hit an ESF from a ground vehicle for as long as you stay within line of sight, that is, but it's still better to move a little bit than to hover completely still. Now when you use the Hornets against flashes and harassers, you need to lead quite heavily because the projectile speed of the Hornets are quite slow, so when they are moving, putting your reticle directly on target is not going to make them hit. Normally, however, when you use them against tanks, the biggest problem or the biggest challenge is to maneuver and fly in a way so you won't get shot down yourself. However, if they are lagging as much as this one, then hitting it is going to be a challenge in itself. Many times when it comes to air to ground, the way you come in, the way you approach, what angle you fly in towards your enemy is the most important and the most deciding factor whether or not you're going to be successful. And hitting the target is many times the easiest part of it. However, when you find a deployed Sunder like this, it can be really, really hard to hit it. It's dodging in a crazy way that I can't hit it. Instead, I'm hitting all these little red dots next to it. And yeah, as much as I'm trying, I'm failing over and over here. A lot of people also prefer to use the flares rather than the fire suppression for air to ground. And I agree to mostly, but even though that is the case, I normally fly with the fire suppression anyway, especially if I expect some air-to-air as well, because with this loadout I still have the Saron laser cannon, and I'm still kind of, I still can defend myself against most ESF pilots. I've also been able to save my ESF from flak and the incoming fire from a variety of other weapons, so I still kind of stick with it mostly, but yeah, I switch it up.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, when it comes to the air-to-ground rule of ESFs, you want to avoid going toe-to-toe against, well, basically anything. Instead, in most situations, you're going to be a lot more successful if you're able to surprise your opponent and hit them from an angle and in a situation where they don't expect you. Now, this is what I consider the most versatile loadout. You are, of course, quite vulnerable to a lot of things without the external afterburners, but you can attack and you can kill any kind of target with the Hornet missiles, even though the only thing they're actually good at are ground vehicles. Now let me show you a little bit of the usage of the Hornet missiles before we move on. Now, one of the things that's going to factor in whether or not you're going to be successful as an air-to-ground player is how much your enemies shoot you to ground nose guns of the ESFs. And I feel like this could be the beginning of a series, actually, depending on your feedback and if you have any questions and some such. I have Arexiumed the Banshee, but I have not used the Airhammer or the Light PPA all that much. Either way, I'm going to end this video with a super risky light PPA farm here and two situations where I'm using Banshee and PPA in air-to-air combat. Not fair in any way though, but yeah, still air-to-air. I would say thank you all for watching and bye for now.